Ah yes, Cammy, the camo-clad military mummy who has been a recognisable character in gaming ever since her debut in 1993. Cammy White is easily the most influential of the titular new challengers who featured in Super Street Fighter 2, remaining a fan favourite even 30 years later. In her iconic green one-piece military outfit, the special operative gave Chun-Li a run for her money for the title of the sexiest woman in gaming, with this British brawler being equally as deadly in combat too. Thanks to Cammy's endearing legacy in fighting games, this would mean it would only be a matter of time before her greatness would expand past the Street Fighter universe, resulting in her receiving a video game of her very own. Well, kind of at least anyway. So join me today as we look at a forgotten franchise that would not only feature this gaming icon, but even be named directly after one of her most famous attacks. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of Gunspike. Yeah. 1993 would see Capcom release the fourth iteration of the iconic Street Fighter 2 game, evolving the immediately iconic two-player fighter to the CP System 2 hardware with Super Street Fighter 2. With this upgrade, much of the sound and many of the visuals were overhauled. The subtitle of The New Challengers would bring the most notable advancements to the cast by adding 4 brand new warriors to the crew. Icons like DJ float in and out of the franchise. T-Hawk's tribe finds representation in Lily in the new title, and Fei Long is, well, Fei Long. Rising above all of the others was Cammy White, a British special agent that added some new cheeky female representation to the franchise. Making appearances in the cartoon, the movie played by Kylie Minogue of all people, the various anime series and all branches of the franchise, Cammy was everywhere. Well, mostly everywhere anyway, as shockingly she missed out on being included as a playable character in the Street Fighter 3 games. At the start of the new millennium, a game though would finally see release that was fully dedicated to this blonde bombshell. Developed by Saikyo on Sega's Naomi platform, the arcade equivalent hardware to the Sega Dreamcast, Gunspike would hit Japanese arcades in the year 2000. Localised as Gunspike in the West, this now obscure title would be named after one of Cammy's most iconic attacks. Thanks to the flagging sales of the Dreamcast at this point, in America the title would come out with 2 other Capcom ports to the platform, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis and Dino Crisis, reminding fans of a legacy of Capcom games on Sega's platforms in the waning days of their legendary relationship. Over in Cammy's home of the United Kingdom, Gunspike would release as a budget title, retailing exclusively at Game for just £30 British as late as 2002. In fact, Capcom wouldn't even bother to publish the title themselves, passing off duties to Big Ben Interactive, giving the release the disappointing notoriety of being the final officially published release for a Sega console in that region. But just because it was the last game doesn't mean it was a bad game, so let's learn more. Firstly, what is interesting about Gunspike is that, as you can see, Cammy's game is not from the fighting game genre, and instead functions as an overhead shooter of all things, which I guess makes perfect sense really given Cammy's military background. This genre was outside of Capcom's wheelhouse, so they went to developers who knew how to handle such experiences. The master of shmups from the era, Saikyo. Known for the Gunbird, Sengoku Ace and the Strikers series, in 2000 alone they released another shooter, Dragon Blaze, alongside action title Load Runner, the Dig Fight, an idol quiz title, a mahjong title, and an Ossen themed table tennis game. This would be the most packed schedule the developer would ever have. The shooter would have a relatively simple control scheme, with a shoot button, a more personalised attack button, and a button allowing players to target characters known as the mark button. While 3 buttons would be a bit limiting in concept for a Street Fighter game, a shooter would find it to be an embarrassment of riches. Beyond the 3 basic functions of the control scheme, players can combine the layout to perform a range of special attacks. To perform the most powerful of these, known as Super Specials, these are executable by hitting all 3 buttons but only first collecting special in-game tokens. These can be picked up from random enemies in the single player mode, but are always dropped by a defeated partner in the game's 2-player mode. Overall, the control scheme in Gunspike is great. It adds a layer of strategy to the gameplay, requiring players to prioritise targets and plan their movements effectively. The gameplay itself is fast, frenetic and challenging, You'll face hordes of enemies, dodge projectiles, and engage in intense boss battles. The mix of shooting and melee combat creates a unique dynamic, providing a satisfying balance between ranged and close quarter combat. As touched on earlier, the game offers both single player and multiplayer modes, allowing you to team up with a friend for cooperative play. The multiplayer mode adds to the replay value as you can tackle the game's challenges together. Speaking of partners, earlier I referred to this as a Cammy game, which raises the question, who exactly would be your partners? The game has an eclectic cast of characters across Capcom's various lines. Beyond the obvious inclusion of Cammy as the lone playable representative of Street Fighter II, Charlie Nash would be playable too, a representative from the Alpha series. Darkstalkers would be represented too by the hidden character, BB Hood. But Capcom didn't only include characters from fighting game franchises here. Interestingly, Arthur from the Ghosts and Goblins series would appear in a giant golden robot with a gun lance, giving him a bit more scale alongside the full-size adults. Thus meaning he was playable in Gunspike years before his more well-known crossover appearances occurred in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Capcom's strongest argument for a mascot, MegaMan, was also included as a hidden character as well, in his traditional form I might add, despite the fact that X franchise was in full swing at this time. Building on this, the game would introduce some completely new characters, but both whom had their basis in other Capcom titles. Shiba Shintaro would be based on the similarly titled Siva from their often forgotten Three Wonders title, and Simone would be directly based on Lin Kuwasara from the action beat-em-up Alien vs Predator. In fact, both of these games are great, so I urge you to check them out whenever you get the chance. But by far the coolest character addition to the whole game is one of the bosses who you must defeat. The Street Fighter Alpha series had previously highlighted a strange relationship between Vega and Cammy. Vega is a crazy narcissistic psychopath who wants to purge all perceived ugliness from the world, quite literally, including ugly people. In the Alpha series, M. Bison tasks Vega with killing Cammy, but ends up saving her instead, as he cannot bring himself to let an aesthetically beautiful person die. It goes against his warped moral code. Vega is back as a boss in Gunspike, whereby even in the western versions of the game goes under his Japanese name, Balrog, appearing as a new and even more psychotic version of the clawed Spaniard from Street Fighter 2. This time he will be represented as Fallen Balrog, a new gothic version of the character who seems to have given up on trying to protect his beauty with his trademark mask. I find Fallen Balrog extremely intriguing, so let me know if you'd like me to make a standalone video on this twisted soul down the line on here. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. As cool as this character is, sadly, like most crossover titles, Gunspike has a very loose plot. The best we would get is a story focusing on the threats of Psychica Sting, the leader of a terrorist organisation. In the distant year of 20XX, people live in fear of this villain's robot soldiers, and the World Union for Peace has recruited Cammy's anti-robot special force and provided them with motor boots, allowing for them to have enhanced mobility over the stages. This gives an in-game reason for the cast to be skating across the screen to fully realise their shooting capabilities. So, at least there's a reason as to why the characters move like they do, which is in line with the title's canon. Canon. Get it? In terms of visuals, Gunspike showcases colourful and detailed graphics that are well suited to the Dreamcast capabilities. The character designs are faithful to their respective franchises, and the environments and enemy designs are visually appealing. However, it's worth noting that the graphics may appear somewhat dated by today's standards. So Gunspike would be loaded with an interesting cast and crew paired with a paper-thin plot. But what did journalists think at the time of this unique footnote in the annals of gaming history? GameSpot would highlight its arcade-style gameplay, giving the game a solid enough 7.8 out of 10, with them claiming that replayability could be found in this one thanks to a variety of offense, speed and maneuverability. They would conclude that Gunspike is quite a bit of fun to play through 2 or 3 times, but it will begin to lose its luster under constant scrutiny. It looks great with nicely modelled enemies and especially sharp textures, so those wanting for eye candy won't be left empty-handed. The variety of playable characters and the fact that the game presents the first several levels in a random order does give it a certain replay value, but it's better played occasionally than often. It won't keep you entertained forever, but if you can get around its lack of length, Gunspike delivers. IGN would tread the same ground, rating it a slightly higher 8.8. Although they clearly like the game, they too would bitch about the length. They would state, Gunspike came out originally as an arcade game, and the longevity of an arcade depended on how many quarters you could pump into it. With the game at home, even though you're limited to 3 credits, it's only a matter of time before you beat the game within the credit limit. Though the game sports a gallery mode, there really isn't a lot to come back for second helpings. It would have been nice to see even more extra characters or additional modes, but in the end, Gunspike is definitely a great game that, despite lacking longevity, will satisfy those nervous reflex twitches. While Gunspike received positive reviews upon its release, it is worth noting that the game may not be for everyone. Its difficulty level can be quite high at times, and the gameplay can become repetitive over time. Additionally, the lack of a deep story or extensive campaign mode may be disappointing for players looking for a more narrative-driven experience. Gunspike for the Dreamcast offers an enjoyable and challenging shoot-'em-up title. With its unique blend of shooting and melee combat, innovative control scheme and cooperative multiplayer mode, it can all in all provide a lot of joy. Gunspike captures the essence of classic arcade gaming. Its straightforward gameplay, high score chasing and fast-paced action provide an enjoyable and nostalgic arcade-style experience, and that's without even mentioning Cammy and all of the other super cool Capcom references. The title would be a late-day Dreamcast one, and to this day hasn't seen a release on any other console, despite the fact that it would have been a quick port in the early days of the Xbox, and recent consoles like the Switch have a wealth of Psycho ports. So it is a bit criminal in my opinion that this one hasn't made it over to anything. As for Capcom themselves, they wouldn't ignore the title completely, and have gone on to place homages and references to Gunspike in more recent offerings. For example, Cammy's costume would return in Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, and her battles against characters like Charlie Nash and Vega reference the game when wearing this costume. Likewise, Fallen Balrog would appear on a cover of Street Fighter Unlimited No. 11. But more on that one if there is interest in a Fallen Balrog video down the line. Anyway, huge thank you to my friend Chad for helping me co-write this one, and if you enjoyed this, then you will like our video on the unreleased Capcom fighting game from 2003. Yeah, cheerio.